This is all done through the Deadwood Historic Preservation Committee, seen above. And it was legalized November 1st, 1889. This is actually the constitutional provision in the South Dakota signature. Known as the Amendment Q measure. This applied to games such as craps, roulette, and Keno. Oh wait, can we go back to the slide? I wanted to see the picture.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was allegedly the picture of the bar in the Gem Theater. So the Alice Ware place before it burned down. So today, Deadwood has essentially been living off its infamy, its illegality, and now turning all the things it was famous for back in the 1890s and prior into tourism. So they have the HBO series, which regained popularity and intrigue for the town. See that right there. This is Deadwood today, and this is the Deadwood website. So as you can see, they are actively marketing gambling in their towns, like the thrill of the early 1800s. It's now designated as a National Historic Landmark. And I will say, just to connect back to the Sioux, in the 1980s, the U.S. government offered to do a reparation for the Black Hills being stolen. I think it's like thousands of dollars, and the Sioux didn't touch a single penny because to them it was no, we want our sacred land back. This money isn't worth it. So again, just very interesting to see how all this connects. And now, in honor of 8 Men Out, I saw on the website historical committee that they had a big history of baseball, and so I want to touch on Deadwood history of baseball. Okay, so this is the first time that baseball was ever mentioned in Deadwood paper. Right here, again, baseball, the mining camps. You can see the players right here. You can see the lodges. Then the baseball team, miners playing. You can see the horsebacks. This guy was African American in the mining town, famous athlete. He could do everything, and he would start the first African American league of Deadwood. This guy was actually playing for the Chicago Sox about like 8-10 years before the events of the Black Sox scandal. And then like Babe Ruth and Bob Menzel came to Deadwood and actually played there. And this is my favorite thing ever. This was a review in the Black Hills Daily Times, August 5th, 1890, where someone, let me just read it to you. 2 men were out, and Buttinger, who was on first, attempted to steal second, but was caught. And then the dirty loafer literally knocked the ball from outfield pan, and then struck him a violent blow with his clenched hand. Outfield started to retaliate, and all the Chadwell players gathered around him. But a gentleman from Rapid City rushed out and, drawing a revolver, took Bittinger that he would shoot him full of holes. The marshal interfered, however, and saved the white-livered cur's life. So that was baseball in Deadwood.
That's a fun game.
And my sources and the groundhog. Gopher. Apologies.
Wow. You were ending so well too. Any questions? Have you been to Deadwood?
No.
Have you seen the series?
No.
Which is probably rated R, so get parental approval. But it's actually really good. And as it's in Deadwood?
Yeah.
I've been there. I was there before it became a gambling town, and it was pretty run down.
Yeah.
And now it's a massive tourist. It's kind of cool.
So yeah, that's the story of Deadwood. But actually, it's a town. There's so much more. But yeah.
All right. Good job. All right. Let's get to. Give me 10 seconds. 5, 4, go.
Okay, this is American football, the history, the legend. I want to start off by saying, so this presentation, it talks about how kind of the idea of it almost got banned. It didn't necessarily almost get banned. Roosevelt didn't necessarily want it banned. It just was really, really violent, and it needed reforms. So, the era. the main year we're talking about is 1905, a little bit of 1904. But it was Teddy Roosevelt's second term as president at this point. And another really important thing is that the Russo-Japanese War is happening from 1904 to 1905. And Roosevelt played a substantial role in the negotiations, which helped build the Treaty of Portsmouth. And that was like, he was really feeling himself after that. He was like, I'm going to negotiate so many things and bring so much peace. So I thought that kind of played a really big thing. And then two important characters, McCracken's actually spelled with a C. So that was an accident. But two important characters, Walter Camp, who is known as the father of American football, and he played a leading role in developing the American game as distinct from rugby. And he played halfback, served as team captain, which is at the time equivalent to head coach, and became a member of the Intercollegiate Football Association, which we'll talk about later. And basically, he played a really big role in a bunch of the rule regulations and such. And yes, and he also coached football at Yale from 1888 to 1892. He was a star player before then on the team, and his team ended up winning 67 games while losing only 2. So he was super, super cool. And then Henry McCracken also plays a crucial role in the story. He was the New York University chancellor, and he ended up being one of the people who made a meeting between 13 different schools to reform football. So those are some important people. The gear, absolutely absurd. So first of all, like no helmets, basically ever. A couple people would wear them, but there was a lot of rules regarding gear in the sense that they didn't want people who were tackling to get hurt. So like, for example, you couldn't have like knee pads or like something that was hard on your knees because they wanted people to be able to hit your knees and not get hurt from hitting your knees. So they also, like, as I said, no helmets. So a lot of them relied on their own hair for protection, which is certainly a choice. Minimal padding, they had wool jerseys. There was assigned numbers for spectators and officials to keep track of them. And then, as I said, occasional leather helmets, but there was no facial protection or any of that. And then I have a quote from one of my sources saying the rulemakers banned some versions of early headgear made of sole leather and generally emphasized the need to pad harder substances that made their way onto football fields. Early shoulder pads, for instance, were padded on the interior and exterior to cushion blows in both directions. Likewise, the original rationale behind football's rules requiring knee pads was to not protect the wearer's knees, but the heads of the opponent's top to tackle the wearers of their knees. So, super cool, super safe. Love that. The creation of American football. So as I previously stated, it was originally very similar to rugby because there was this mob-like play. But some of the earliest regards to American football was Princeton in 1820. They had a game called Ball Town. There's not a lot of specifics on it, but we know that they played it in 1820 at the earliest possibly. And then Harvard had a thing called Bloody Monday. Absolutely gruesome. So they had the freshman and sophomore class play each other. And that started in early as 1827, they think, but they think it could have been as early as like 1800. But in 1860, it was shut down by the local police and the school because it was so insanely violent. And the players ended up holding this thing called funeral football fightum, which is a literal like funeral. They held a funeral for the game. So that was really funny. They all like dressed in black and stuff and like mourned it. So that was a whole thing, but it mostly shut down because it ended up getting attention from like the international press. It was bad. And then Dartmouth, they had old division football, and those rules were first published in 1871, but they played dating back to the 1830s. But overall, they were all just mob style games with large numbers, advancing the ball, simple rules, violence and injury was super common. It was kind of like early football. The best way I can describe it is like a really, really aggressive puppy pile, like most of the game. And then I also forgot to include this on the slide. What I was saying about the international press was that there was a Harvard-Yale game in 1894 that was played in Springfield that was so violent that it was dubbed the bloodbath at Hampton Park. And that's the one that reached the international press. And that one was like a big deal. And then creation continued. So then there's the Princeton v. Rutgers. And that was sort of like mob football mixed with soccer. And this one is considered the first football game, but not American football soccer. And it just kind of shows how like rugby, American football, and soccer all kind of like morphed from each other. But it's just really interesting how they all were kind of played at very similar eras. And then some of the rule changes that started developing it was in 1880. It was changed to from 15 players to 11 on side, and the concept of possession became more important. And then in 1892, there was a rule change so that a team could have 3 consecutive plays, and if a team didn't gain 5 yards or lose 10 yards, they had to turn the ball over to the other team. And then there was this thing where they would link arms. It was like Red Rover, and so they'd link arms and just charge down the field and like plow over people and trample people. So that was awful. Don't do that. Not supposed to do that anymore. But those were like still allowed at this point. And then rather than stretching across the field, teams started assembling themselves into masses. So kind of like I was saying, the really aggressive puppy pile. And they started naming some of the positions. And all of the positions are really confusing when it comes to the names, so I didn't write them all down. And then some of the play examples. I forgot to put an example of the play. So this is one that was really important. It's called the flying wedge. You're not supposed to do that anymore. Not supposed to do that. So there's most of them, as I already said, were like assembling into the masses and then just kind of trampling people as you push down the field. So some of those were called the V-trick, shoving wedge, turtleback, flying wedge, which I have, and then the battering ramp. And at this point, there were like no rules on how many people had to be on the line at a time. And then on May 8th of 1894, they decided that no momentum mass play will be allowed. A momentum mass play is one in which more than 3 men start before the ball is put in play. So advancing when it comes to safety, kind of. And then injuries and deaths leading up to 1905. So this is when it got pretty bad. It was already really violent, really awful, but it got worse. So in 1904, there were 18 football deaths minimum. We don't know exactly for sure because some of the papers were biased, and so they attributed some deaths to football when they might have not been, or some deaths weren't accounted for football because they could say it was something else. But some of the ones that stuck out to me in specific regarding 1905, which was the year of significant reform. They say that there could have been 19, depending on some sources, 25, depending on others. And then some say anywhere between 137 to 168 injuries for like in a season, which is awful. And I saw some sources saying that it averaged like 2 really bad injuries per player in a season, which is not ideal. And then 2 deaths that stuck out to me in 1905 to just kind of show the 2 ends of the, I don't know, just the differing types of gruesomeness of the game is. One was a 14-year-old boy who died while he was playing in a scrimmage from a weed penetrating so far up his nose that it penetrated his brain, killing him. So that's like one that's just absolutely awful. And then another one that stuck out to me was an 18-year-old who was playing and he got tackled in a pretty awful way that it broke his rib and his rib ended up penetrating his heart. So he died like that. But just a lot of really bad internal bleeding that led to a lot of deaths because it was just not safe at all and they didn't have proper gear. So, yes. And then, so some of the public outcry, this is just like another thing from some of the injuries, it was just bad. But so there was obviously a lot of discourse on the sport because of how violent it was and people were starting to get pretty upset with it. And honestly, I think people were getting a little bit bored watching some of it because they all were just kind of fighting in one area of the field because the forward pass wasn't allowed. So I think people were getting bored and then they were like, and people are dying and getting injured. This isn't as fun to watch anymore. But so one that stuck out was death of Gerald Moore at Union College. And he suffered injuries due to a game against New York University. And that kind of played into Henry McCracken and how he ended up doing some of the reforms because he was the chancellor at New York University. And then the president of Harvard, Charles Eliot, wanted football eradicated. And Roosevelt has some opinions on that because Roosevelt was actually a very big fan of the sport. So he was like, yeah, it's super manly. And so he didn't agree with Charles Eliot on that, but the president thought it was so violent that it should just be completely gotten rid of. And then there was another myth that President Theodore Roosevelt threatened to shut down the game when he saw a newspaper photograph of Squawkmer lineman Bob Tiny Maxwell with his face bloodied in a brutal contest with Pennsylvania. And that's not true. But, you know, people have a lot of opinions about why this reform ended up taking place. And then something that I thought was insane is that I was reading some of these newspapers and a lot of them ended up blaming the individuals for their death due to their skill level not being high enough rather than like awful things that were in the sport. And another thing from somebody who died in 1905, there was one girl who died that season. And that one was important because she was the daughter of like a famous politician at the time. And she died while playing football. And a newspaper was like awful, obviously, because it was like 1905. And they were like, yeah, it's because she's a woman and she shouldn't be playing that sport. And it was just bad. And so like people would go into the game and they would die and they'd be like, well, it was their third game. They shouldn't have been playing anyways. And then it's like, but they died. And I'm just like that. So yeah. And then Roosevelt stepping in. So on October 9th of 1905, he held a meeting at the White House. He invited 6 men, including the football coaches of Yale, Harvard, and Princeton, and he encouraged them to clean up the game. And since, as I said, 18 players in 1905 like died alone there, minimum. And one other thing is, it's after this reform, it was like pretty early on in the season, but his son ended up breaking his nose during that game, during one of the games, and they think that it could have possibly been on purpose. But he had a paternal interest, I think, in like reforming the game because he loved the sport so much, and all 4 of his sons would go on to play it. But it was this year that his son ended up being on the Harvard team, and he decided to step in. And him and Walter Camp ended up sending a lot of letters back and forth, some of which discussed Charles Eliot, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't agree with that guy. We need football." So that happened, and then Henry McCracken, he ended up doing a meeting, I believe it was of 13 schools in December of 1905 to reform football playing rules. And also, going back to the meeting in October, I have a summary that the 6 men drew up. And it says, quote, "At a meeting with the President of the United States, it was agreed that we consider an honorable obligation to exist to carry out in letter and in spirit the rules of the game of football relating to roughness, holding, and foul play, and the active head coaches of our universities being present with us pledge themselves to so regard it and to do their utmost to carry out that obligation." So obviously the season was still pretty violent after this meeting, but that's why more rules reform happened. So, okay, immediate changes. So after these meetings, they started altering the rules. So the forward pass was allowed, which made people spread out on the field, so there was less pileups. And then they abolished the dangerous mass formations. They set it officially to 11 players on each side, and then they created a neutral zone between the offense and defense. And then the first down distance doubled to 10 yards, which had to be gained in 3 downs. So those were just some of the rules that stuck out to me that were ended up being changed. And then so on December 28th, that's when representatives from 62 colleges and universities met to appoint a rules committee for intercollegiate football. And then in January, the rules committee met for the first time. And then in March, the Intercollegiate Athletic Association of the United States is formally established. And then that ended up being renamed to be the NCAA. So big deal. And they actually have, I think it's called the Teddy, but they have an award in Teddy Roosevelt's name because of the reforms that he helped with football or NCAA. It's like one of their highest honors, that I thought was really cool. Okay, and then legacies and the 1930s. So since our unit is gambling, one of the first major betting scandals was between the Canton Bulldogs and the Massillon Tigers, and that was in 1906. So that was like one of the major first betting scandals in professional football in the United States. So I thought that was just a fun fact to include. And then in 1906 and 1907, fatalities and injuries did decline, but then they increased again in 1909, so there's further reform. And then they also increased again in 1914, so then they did more reform again in 1914. And then I already stated that the Intercollegiate Football Association would become the NCAA. And then the first NFL game was October 3rd of 1920, which it was technically the APFA, so it hadn't been renamed yet. And then the early years of the NFL are considered to be the 1920s to 1932. And then the sport gradually gained more popularity, splitting into 2 divisions in 1933 after the first playoffs game between the Chicago Bears and the Portsmouth Spartans, because it just gained so much attention and it got really, really popular. So they're like, oh, we should make this a bigger thing. And then now it's the most popular sport in the United States. So that's some of the history of American football. And one other side note, I thought this was really cool. So I have family who went to Cornell, and I was totally geeking out because they were on the football team. And so my great grandpa was on the Cornell football team, but I found his uncle on the 1905 Cornell football team. So one of the Ivy Leagues that was involved with all of the stuff from 1905. And that's him right there. And I just thought it was really cool. And I want to share it with you guys because you can see their gear and I thought it was super cool. So yeah, that's American football.
You know what position he played?
I don't. I know that in 1906 he was their manager and coach. He was like one of the head people on that. But I think I know he wasn't the quarterback. But I'm not 100% sure because I couldn't find that on their website and my mom did not know. So yeah.
That's really cool. Any questions? I do find it interesting that you mentioned like the Bloody Monday, which kind of sounds awesome, but
Yeah, they called it like the death harvest. That 1905 year is not good.
it reminds me of the reason why they have a vigilante parade. It was a fight between the classes
Yeah.
and Helena High that led to the parade.
It's so cool. It's so awful, but it's so cool. But yeah. Okay, there you
All right,
go.
very good. That's great. Nice job. All right. Did I see a prairie dog?
Yeah, it's on my sources side, except I think I forgot to click the sources.
What about holding company?
That's not me. Yes, it is.
Oh, I see. Okay, here we go.
See, they're playing football.
That's the flying wedge.
Yeah. Well, the whole tactic was just take out the like best player within the first 5 minutes of the game, whether through like injuring them really, really badly or try to kill them. So, yeah, not ideal. Don't do that, guys.
Yeah, knees were targeted.
Oh, yeah.
And you blow your knee back then, it's just kind of hope for the best. Oh, cool. Okay. All right. I'm just kind of going through and okay, we haven't had gambling for a while, so Keegan, we'll do a couple slot machines. Oh, by the way, for any time left, these babies, arrow boards, but that just also says that Tucker's gotta go last. Yeah. So you go last on, so Seth Farrell. Right. Perfect. All right. I am almost ready. I am ready. Go.
Okay, so I'm doing slot machines and I'll do a brief history of the Hitman and sit up till the uh mobile ones. The screen can pass that is kind of just brief. So the Sitman. It's a Hitman and Sit, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I have it wrong. So the Pitman and Sit, it was the first like rendition of a slot machine, and it was not. It was used for a totally different thing than what they are nowadays. You would get like free drinks and cigarettes. So anything that was like non-monetary, and it became a really popular bar game. And it was created by the two men, Pitman and Sit, who were out from Brooklyn. And then they removed 2 cards from the house, being the 10 of spades and the jack of hearts, to cut the percentage of getting a royal flush by 50%. So that's kind of where they started. And after that, this one, the Liberty Bell, is really important. It was made by Charles Augustus Bay. And this is the first like slot machine because it's most closely resembled to current day. It was 1894, and it was built on the idea of the Sitman pit, and it was originally called. Okay, sorry. There's one before it, the Liberty Bell, which was the 41144. And it was manufactured. And it became a wild success, which is what led to the Liberty Bell, he created the carded bell, which was the first 3-wheel, and then he used a mixture of both of those to make the Liberty Bell. And then in 1907, the operator bell, which was built by Herbert Miller, and it was kind of just playing on the idea of the Liberty Bell. Um, it was wildly popular, just like the Liberty Bell. And then this one was found at a lot of gathering places, so bowling alleys, tobacconists, and shops. This is where they kind of get more modern. The Bali Manufacturing Company made the first entirely electromechanical slot machine called Money Hunter. They included the lever, even though they didn't need it. They used a button. Or, yeah. Sorry, they would get rid of the lever later, but it was still on the design, even though it was not intended. Still. And then it was also the first bottomless copper, meaning that people could pay out or get paid out as much as 500 coins. With the gradual aging of the machine, the lever was replaced with buttons. Yeah. And then Fortune Coin was the very first video slot machine. It was manufactured in Kearney Mesa, California, by a Las Vegas-based company, which also kind of starts Las Vegas's like being known as the gambling town because it blew up so wildly. And yeah, it used a modified Sony TV as its display. And it was first shown in the Hilton Hotel before becoming statewide. And they had to make it cheat proof because they were very prone to that at the time, especially with this new electronic one. And then it racked in a lot of stuff. Marked a huge milestone for options. Megabytes was the first progressive jackpot. The first person that actually won it, his name was Terry Williams, which I did a little bit of digging on him. And he basically won it, and his wife, I believe, got a call, but she believed it was scam. So she like, I don't know, she was angry at him, and then they finally met up and he said it was true, and she like got really happy. But then he got really terrible advice from someone who told him not to pay taxes the first year on it. So yeah, he basically just lost it all the second year, or a majority of it. Yeah, and then it was 4,988,886.
86,
It was quite a lot.
nothing to that.
Yeah. And then yeah, that marked Megabucks as one of like the more popular progressive jackpots. It's still today like a big thing, I believe. And then after that, it was Cash Splash, which this is where the introduction of online gambling. It brought really heavy skepticism because everyone wasn't like well adapted to, like it didn't feel right because it wasn't physical. And it all changed though because a company called Microgaming came in and created the first online casino, which kind of prompted a lot of other companies to come in and start making their own. Going into that, and the first iPhone came out, it was, or sorry, yeah, mobile slots became a thing in 2005, and it didn't give actual money until the first iPhone was released in 2007, just due to how like it was set up. You couldn't put in like personal information. It was just kind of a pastime thing.
Or just like a little.
Yeah, until that came out, and then they were able to put in like their information again, the hangouts. And then in 2008, when the App Store came out, it sparked a lot of people to make their own machines, because you could easily go in and make a RNG, um, whatever you call it, like an RNG device, which is what slot machines are being made. And then I went into the psychology of slot machines. The effect slot machines have on a lot of our psychology can cause major addiction. One example being commonly known as a gambler's fallacy, which is the belief that past outcomes of random events influence future probabilities. Which isn't true. In this case.
Prove it. Next time, I'm gonna win.
So it affected people, infected them really badly, causing people to go bankrupt and such. And another example of this is the desire to feel in control, because I feel like that's just a normal human thing. Like you have to have a little control. So people believe that doing little rituals could be could increase your chances. So I think one of the common things I saw was people crossing their fingers. And also a lot of people like tapping and hitting the machine. That was also a luck ritual. I don't know.
Science.
And then yeah, which just builds on the fact that they were only paying attention to their winnings and not really their losses. So if they the confirmation bias, it could. Sorry, I got this all messed up. Which could be something as simple as crossing your fingers. However, this can lead people to only pay attention to their winnings, losing track of their spendings.
They ignore their win, they ignore when they lose,
Yeah,
and then when they win one, it's, oh, I'm on a streak, kind of thing.
yeah. Oh, and yeah, that's the ritual. So they do it once and it work, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna keep doing that." But then they would only pay attention to when it goes.
It's kind of confirmation.
Yeah, and then confirmation bias. I read there was a myth that people have relating to confirmation bias, the hot and cold myth. So some machines are just meant to pay out, while others are only meant to take money. It's purely a myth, but it's a very big one. It kept popping up a lot. So yeah, there's that. And then the lights and colors on the machines also have a huge effect on the psychology of people. It's called LDW, which is called losses disguised as wins. It tricks you into believing you're winning due to the flashing lights and pictures, even though you're getting back less than what you paid. But it triggers that dopamine that a lot of people do, and it's fiction. And then there's another one which I thought was kind of interesting, which is kind of like it reminds me of today with people with phones. It's called machine zone, the machine zone. So everyone just gets lost in the machine. So then they just keep spending and spending until they snap back. And yeah, it's not good. So then the government also, there is a lot of different regulations for it. I feel like these are probably some of the more important ones, especially the Johnson Act. But due to the increase of popularity of slot machines, it led to a lot of government action and regulations due to how they function. One of the big things to understand is most, if not all, slot machines are regulated at the state level. Most, if not all. For example, a big thing was age. Every state has a bunch of different ages, anywhere from 18 to 21. I believe we're 18, but 21 for some other things, the slot machines. It can depend on what state you're in. There are also regulations on how much you can wager. So that I think plays into more of the tax you have to do on it, which that's also controlled by the government. Well, there's still in place. Oh, and they also regulated how much time you can spend on the machines. And this is more for people that are like really addicted. Like, I don't know, they have special like, personnel, I don't know, to watch over people that are there for too long. Yeah. And then the Johnson Act is really important because it restricts the interstate commerce of gambling devices, making it illegal to transport, manufacture, sell, or possess machines designed primarily for gambling. Which, yeah, it became a really big thing because now you can't. I don't know, it got rid of a lot of brain machines, which are the ones that are just steal money. They're not actual. They're rigged. And then the other one, which I personally, it was kind of a smaller one, but it was pretty big. The Indian Gaming Regulations Act, which basically affirmed that states could not regulate tribal gaming if the state already permitted such gaming, which it was a big thing in like the 1980s, and this act was in 1988, I believe. So they got instated. Because there was a series of like a lot of different trials due to this, and I forgot what there's a really important one, but that's what led to this. So, yeah, like
Something's a dollar place, I can't figure it out, but
that's a normal environment for a prairie dog.
any question? Yeah, there's all kinds of different ways to play slots, you know, have you ever played it or played it on?
No,
Because it's illegal, right?
not for me.
And it's, I've never seen that Pitman and City game before, and that's just like the poker machines today, that's what it's on. And then these ones are like, you have to get the,
Yeah. And it's also, it was kind of confusing trying to find pictures because there's so many different variants of just one game. Like I think the Pitman and Sit alone had like there's that one, and then there was one that was more well done, and I think that one was more of a rendition.
oh, okay.
But yeah, there is a lot of different ones.
I tell you, you're supposed to hold on to your paper, you weren't supposed to give it to me yet. But it's okay, so hold on to them, you collect it on. What days?
Thursday.
All right, any questions? All right, good job. Well, who still has to go? Do you want to go? Anybody want to get started for a couple minutes?
Psychology.
What, you want,
Mine's
well,
psychology.
want to get started? No?
No, I forgot.
Oh, okay, I said, I think I said no. Let's start.
Mine's not as long as the John Wayne case. But that one was like 20 minutes.
Actually, yours is a really good one because you come a different psychology, so it'll be easier, I think, to get back into it,
Yes. That's fine.
maybe.
Yeah, I don't have like a bunch of people to talk about or crazy lore. Well, yeah, psychology of gambling addiction. Well, a lot of people joke about it. It's kind of funny. Sometimes it's not super funny. Kind of sucks. So what is it? It's often referred to, other than gambling addictions, compulsive gambling, gambling disorder, or ludomania. Basically, it's defined as the uncontrollable urge by the Mayo Clinic, the uncontrollable urge to keep gambling despite the toll it takes on your life. And to have it, you have to have felt like 4 symptoms in the past year. And some of these symptoms are basically like you feel the need to hide gambling from your family because you know they're worried about it, but you don't really want to take the consequences. You just keep gambling despite all the money you're losing, or like the urge to gamble is kind of controlling your entire life and is kind of just taking over. So, and what can cause it is usually it can be factored in by like other mental health issues. Especially if you're already like addiction prone, borderline personality, often like they're really addiction prone, so that's a big one. Family or friend influence is another really big one, because when you see all of your like family or friends going out gambling, you really want to do that too because it looks cool and hey, you could win money. And surprisingly enough, there are also medications used to treat Parkinson's and restless leg syndrome because they're dopamine agonists. So because you're losing all this dopamine, you feel the need to chase more dopamine, and gambling for a lot of people gives them a way to chase this dopamine. And so kind of how it works is, so gambling can trigger large amounts of dopamine. And as you keep winning, or like you keep doing it more regularly, your brain becomes slowly less responsive. But that becomes more responsive as you keep doing it. But eventually, when you see like all these like small wins, you don't really care as much. So then people start gambling higher and more for that like higher level of pleasure again. So that's why you see people like taking these big risks like it's nothing, because the payoff is usually worth it. So, and the design of casinos often exploits this feeling, this addiction, kind of like with the slot machine, like all of the lights, it goes into the enticing design. There's also like a lack of, so yeah, intimate and windowless spaces. So there's a lack of natural lighting because of their windowless spaces. Slot machines everywhere, and you see all these fun lights, all these fun games. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever been into like the Motherlode or the Montana Nugget. Growing up, like with my grandma going there as a kid, I just saw all these fun games, flashing lights. It looked so cool, so enticing. And there's also usually a lack of clocks because it kind of lures people in. It's like, think like the Lotus Eaters, Greek mythology, like you're just wrapped in, you don't really care, you're not keeping track of time, you're just focused on all these games and fun colors. And you get into like this zone. And they'll also use, yeah, stimulating lights and sounds as well as memorable scents. I've been to a couple grimy diner casinos there. The scent kind of never leaves you.
What kind of casino?
Oh, like grimy diner casinos.
Oh, I mean, I'm sure, yeah.
Like where Shelley's used to be, and where again like Motherlode, Montana Nugget. And then so not only do wins affect the brains, but so do near misses. And so houses will do this often with jackpots or like slot machines, like, you know, like the kid versions, there's that big wheel jackpot at like Pizza Ranch. You pull that thing and you watch the little thing go. Super great watching that thing go, pretty fun. So almost wins get the brain stimulated almost as much as like a near win. Like I'm sure we've had it happen. Like it goes, the little thing, the little arrows right above it. It's like darn, well, and you get into like this feeling of, well, the next round I'll get it. And that's why there's that joke of like, gamblers who lose are always like the ones who stop right before they win. Like that's kind of where the joke comes from. And it triggers that urge to keep going, convincing you the next round will be it. And casinos and houses will exploit this. Jackpots are like often ruled in the house's favor. The most likely turnout is the near miss, like right above the jackpot.
Yeah, we'll stop right there.
Yeah.
Good place to stop. Half block.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll get full of that. Very good. Thank you. And thank you for starting. All right, these are great. Another great day. These are fun presentations. It's a good unit. Oh, by the way, my plan is this. We'll have treats on Thursday. No, wait. Well, what do you, but the treat will be what we're gonna gamble with. What do you think?
I was gonna ask if I should bring my boxing gloves.
Oh my god. Sage in June.
I think if we start duking it out, somebody would complain, and we'll do it in Mr. Larson's room. We'll get in trouble.
I got 2 sets. I got black ones and pink ones.
Goodbye, everybody. Nice job.
I might say it gets out of class on Thursday.
Okay.
You get the.
Well, you let me know what that means.
Say it again.
So we don't have like any like multiple choice questions or anything.
You might do one thing really quick with that.
So I'll be able.
Oh, okay. Perfect. And we'll give it right back. Now, is it chips in here? Oh.
Yes.
Many,
Oh,
many.
hefty.
So I'm gonna bring mine too.
This would be more than enough.
My family has a problem with games. We have like a poker table, like it's 18 feet long. It is a problem.
That's cool.
And bring me.
But do they have 2 barrel boards now?
They don't have any favorite boards. I
Look
get
at
people
that.
play Pharaoh though, so now they know.
Perfect. That worked out well. Barrel's it's actually fun.
Yes, it seems like a good game. Yeah, popular for these.
Now, here's the deal. On that Thursday, you don't have.
Yes, the third, yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna be pretty awesome and like completely free because it's been my one time for my one class.
On Thursday?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't have to come. If you're hanging around, want to play Farrell, after Britain, that's fine. If not, don't worry about it. Sound good? Now, Friday, you gotta be here.
Gosh.